It began with a box. Plain. Worn. Covered in a thin film of dust thick enough to suggest it hadn't been touched in decades. It wasn't found in a library or museum or some locked vault under government control. It was found in a seaside house in Virginia Beach, tucked behind the baseboards of an attic crawl space. Forgotten, but never lost. The house itself was unspectacular. It had once belonged to a family friend of Edgar Cayce, the so-called sleeping prophet, a man who gave thousands of readings while in trance, on health, Atlantis, consciousness, the soul. Some called him a fraud, others called him a prophet, but everyone agreed he knew something. The box had no writing, no markings, no reason to matter, but inside, a manila folder, a strip of magnetic tape, and an envelope. The envelope read, in shaky pencil, "Do not open until 70 years after." No date, no name, just those words. The tape was labeled only once, faintly etched into its plastic edge. EC 1944/mirror. What followed would never appear in books. It would not be broadcast or analyzed in journals. It would live in basements, on copied USBs, in email threads that mysteriously vanish, pass between those who understood that not everything sacred comes in bright lights. They say the tape was a conversation, not an interview, not an interrogation, a conversation. The voice answering was Cayce's, recognizably older, breath weaker, but still steady. The other voices never identified, but it wasn't a journalist. It wasn't a believer. This person knew what to ask, and they weren't afraid of what would come next. The topic was death, but not as a poetic metaphor, not as theology or theory. Cayce didn't speak of pearly gates or reincarnation cycles. What he described was systematic, a passage, a process. 7 levels the soul passes through after life ends. 7 thresholds. And behind each, something less comforting than the last. He spoke calmly, as if describing a landscape he had walked many times before. The first level, disorientation. Here, he said, the soul wakes inside what feels like a dream, but not a peaceful one. It's like swimming through syrup, he said, movements delayed, shapes half formed. Time loose. The soul doesn't realize it has died. It searches for something, light, sound, connection, but finds only echoes of its own memory. Some stay here for minutes, others for decades. They are not punished, they are simply stuck. Cayce said, they do not see the truth because they are still looking with human eyes. The second level, reflection. Not judgment, not punishment, reflection. Here, the soul is shown its life, but not from its own point of view. Instead, every action is relived from the eyes of the one it touched. The kindness you gave, the cruelty you shrugged off, all of it returns. But you don't just watch, you feel. Their joy, their confusion, their pain. This is where most weep, Cayce said. This is where most wish they could return. He didn't speak of sin, he spoke of resonance, the choices that rang out like bells through the lives of others. And how many of those bells we never hear until it's far too late.
Before we continue, if the unknown calls to you, if you seek evidence of what waits beyond the veil, you're not alone. We uncover what was buried, silenced, or forgotten. Like this video to help us keep digging. Subscribe for more truths the world was never meant to see. Share it before this too disappears. Now, back to the story.
The third level, recognition. This is where the soul begins to see that death is not an end, only a crossing. Cayce described beings. He refused to call them angels, who don't speak in language, but in memory, in images, in sensation. They show the soul its place in the structure of things, its thread in the web. Some souls return from this level, often abruptly, often through what doctors call near-death experiences. They awaken changed, as if something followed them back. They are not chosen, he said. They are cracked open. Then came the part that broke the silence in the room where the tape was played. The fourth level, the mirror corridor. Here, he said, the soul walks through a space that is not made of walls, but of possibilities. It does not just recall the life it lived. It sees the lives it could have lived, not as dreams or fantasies, but fully, entirely, in real time, every choice not taken, every path never walked, every word never spoken, In one life, you forgave your brother. In another, you let your rage rot you from inside. In a third, you never had children. In a fourth, you died at 17. And they are all real. They exist, Cayce whispered. Not in the past, not in fiction. In energy, in truth. You see them. You become them. He said it breaks most people, not because of the suffering, but because of the unbearable beauty of what was missed. Here, he said, God is not a judge. God is a mirror. And you, only you, decide if you can look. It was at this point the tape faltered. There's a click, a skip. Some say the next part was erased. Others say it was deliberate. Then, his voice returns. Slower now, as if afraid of his own words. The fifth level, he said. I call it the sea. And then silence. For 32 seconds, just tape hiss. No one knows what he said next. The only audio that survives picks up with a new sentence. I am not allowed to speak of the seventh. Not, I cannot. Not, I don't remember. I am not allowed. By whom and why? The tape ends with a sound like a chair scraping against wood. Then, nothing. What came after was not the end of the story. It was the beginning. The transcript was never published. Not in full, not officially, not with approval. Only fragments remain, typed pages, without headers, without source stamps, watermarked with time and fingerprints of those who tried to keep them hidden. And what they reveal isn't doctrine, it's a map. Not of heaven, not of punishment, not of reward, but of passage. Edgar Cayce never called it the afterlife. He called it the continuation. And for him, the soul's journey didn't begin with death. It simply resumed. He never said where the map came from. He only claimed to have remembered it. We pick up at the fifth level. He called it the Sea of Time. Here, he said, time stops behaving the way we expect. Past, present, future, these words no longer apply. You don't look back on your life, you look through it. Like staring into layers of water, each ripple showing you a different day, a different choice, a different self. Prophets, he said, touch this level, but only briefly. They see not the future, he said, but fixed points in the sea, events so dense they pull time toward them like gravity. He described seeing one of these points, a rupture, not in land, but in meaning. Cities without lights, voices with no mouths, children born remembering their deaths, borders disappearing, not from war, but because they no longer make sense. He did not give dates, but he said it would begin when silence becomes unbearable, and that the first to feel it would be those who had not yet learned to speak, the children. Then came the sixth level. Cayce hesitated here. You can hear it. His voice drops. He clears his throat twice. Then, this is where the shadow separates. He explained that everything we carry, fear, anger, envy, pride, none of it is destroyed here. It is released, like sand falling off your skin, not in judgment, but in necessity, because you cannot cross further while clinging to what is not truly you. He used the word stripping until what remains is light, but not light as we know it, not brightness, not warmth, awareness, a state of being with no want, no resistance, no name. And at this stage, for the first time, the soul touches what Cayce called the echo of the origin. He refused to say God. He said the word was too small, but he described something vast and familiar. He said, it feels like you've been hearing a song your whole life through a wall, and then suddenly you're standing inside the music. Some souls never leave this place. They remain, dissolved into presence, not trapped, not erased, just fulfilled. But a few, very few, continue on, and beyond them waits the final passage, the seventh level. Here, the transcript breaks. The page, handwritten, ends mid-sentence. To describe what lies beyond is, and nothing more. 2 pages later, in different ink, only one line. I am not allowed. We don't know if that was censorship or obedience. Some say Cayce believed the human mind could not bear the image of this level. Not because it was terrifying, but because it was true. Not symbolic, not mythical, real. There is one final note in the transcript. It's not part of the conversation. It appears to be Cayce's own reflection, added afterward. It reads, "There is a door. It cannot be opened by force. It opens only when the soul no longer wishes to enter. Because even desire is a kind of fear." And that is the last sentence before the ink trails off the page. But Cayce did not end his message there. What he left next wasn't about death. It was about us. Now. Because, he said, the soul of a human is not the only one traveling these levels. He believed that humanity itself, as a whole, was going through them. And right now, he said, we are in the third level, recognition. A moment when the species, like a soul, begins to glimpse the web, to see its impact, to feel the harm it has done, and the good it failed to do. And in that awareness, he said, lies the fork. Go forward, or go numb. The warning was clear. He spoke of civilizations that had come before. Atlantis, Sumer, pre-dynastic Egypt. Each reached the third level. Each turned back, not because they were destroyed, but because they chose to forget. Because the burden of remembering was heavier than the comfort of blindness. And that, he said, is the trap we now face. He called it the trial of the living. Not fire, not flood, but meaninglessness. He predicted a rise in mental illness. But not all of it will be illness. Some of it will be awakening. People will hear things, he said. See things, dream things that come true. They will feel pain that is not theirs, and love that has no origin. And the world will panic. 3 phases, he warned, would greet this new kind of human. First, ridicule. They will be mocked, labeled unstable, treated as curiosities or lunatics. Second, isolation. Systems will emerge to contain them, to label, diagnose, and seclude them. It will be called care. It will look like help. Third, temptation. They will be offered positions, money, influence, on one condition. Forget the voice within. Only those who know they are not a body, not a name, not a resume, only they will pass. Because those who pass the trial are not here to be followed. They are here to remember. And to remind. The final pages weren't on the tape. They weren't even in the folder. They were found folded beneath the lining of the box. Paper thick like parchment. Edges curled. Ink faded by time, but legible. 3 pages. No title. No signature. Until the last line. Just EC. It begins with a single phrase. If you are reading this, you've already heard the voice. What voice? He doesn't explain, only warns. Do not argue with it. It is older than you. The rest is less coherent. It doesn't read like a letter or a statement. It reads like something else. A code, maybe. A prayer. Or the fragments of a dream someone tried too hard to remember. Images. Symbols. Half-lines. Broken thoughts. Poetry without rhyme. When the seed touches the sky, the ground will begin to sing. A crack will open between the rooms of the world. Those who were never buried will return, not to haunt, but to ask. Researchers debated for years. Climate catastrophe? A metaphor for information overload? Or something stranger? A fracture in reality, where the boundary between levels wears thin. And from that breach, not the dead, but the forgotten will come through. He writes, they are not evil, but they are hungry, not for flesh, for memory. Then, the danger is not possession. The danger is confusion. Cayce believed these entities, if they can even be called that, don't want to destroy. They want to complete, to finish what was left undone, to speak through the living what they could never say when alive. And some people, he said, will become the threshold, not haunted, not cursed, but tuned, open. The result? A sudden spike in those who dream too vividly. Children who speak of things they've never seen. Artists who create what should be impossible. People who feel what no one around them has said. They will be called sensitives, psychotic, prophets. But Cayce had another word, witnesses. He wrote, they are not here to guide, they are here to feel. And through them, the silence will end. Then, another sudden turn. A prophecy almost no one discusses. The words appear half crossed out, as if someone tried to erase them. When the third continent disappears, that's all it says. No explanation. No continent named. Just that phrase. Some believe it means Australia. Others think Greenland. But many argue it's not land at all. It's a metaphor. A warning about the third space of the spirit. What Cayce once called the place between belief and knowing. If that disappears, only extremes remain. He connects it to a spiritual collapse in the West, churches that speak only of rules, scientists who speak only of numbers, and the soul, forgotten. But then he offers a clue, a single, haunting instruction. When priests begin to sound like officials and scientists like priests, listen only to the children. They still remember. He believed every child, before the age of 5, remembers the space between lives, the levels, the corridor, the sea. But school, fear, routine, they erase it. Unless one generation doesn't forget. Unless memory survives. Then, he says, the world will change. Not gradually. In a single lifetime. Not through revolution. Through recognition. The final page is different. Not poetic. Clear. Concise. Just a few sentences, written in trembling lines. If you are reading this, it means the time has come. Do not look for proof. Look for reflection. And remember, knowledge does not comfort, it transforms. Then, you have a choice. That's all. Some say the man who found the box disappeared weeks later, that he was last seen boarding a plane to Tibet. Others say his body was found, twisted in a way doctors couldn't explain, but most simply say, he was never the same. The contents of the box were copied, uploaded, deleted, archived again, always returning, never allowed to vanish. And maybe that's the point. Maybe Cayce never meant for this to be public. Maybe he meant for it to reach only those who were already starting to feel it. Because this was never a prophecy about the end. It was about a beginning. Not for everyone, but for the ones who remember. Not believe. Remember. They won't look special. They won't speak in riddles. They won't wear robes or chant in temples. One will be a bus driver, another a teacher, a third a cashier in a quiet grocery store. But something in them will feel different. Like they are always waiting for something they forgot. Like they are listening, even in silence. And slowly, they will begin to find each other. Not through words, but through dreams. Glances. Coincidences that make your skin crawl with recognition. They'll know. Not why. Just that they are not alone. Never were. And that death is not an end. It is a veil. And behind it, something is waiting to be seen. The ones who crossed all 7 levels, they remain. Not as ghosts. Not as gods. As warmth. As clarity. As the whisper in your bones when something is right but makes no sense. They are not here to save us. They are here to remind us that what we call reality was never the full story. Now you know. And whether you believe this or not, you are no longer the person you were before reading it. So ask yourself quietly, will you return to the dream? Or will you go further? If this reached you, really reached you, don't share it for clicks. Share it because someone you love might already be remembering too. This is not a drill.